Welcome, one and all, and as you make your way to your allocated seats, good morning. My name's Adam Spencer, and this is the second ABA Banking Conference. Yes, we are back bigger and better this year in a time of transition. We have a jam-packed 2 days ahead of us as we explore the current environment, the economy, and the challenges and opportunities ahead as seen by the banking industry. We're going to incorporate the views of government, regulators, examine the global situation and the big themes of digital transformation, climate transition, and staving off scams, cyber threats, and financial crime. Before we get started, a couple of items of housekeeping. If you haven't been to an event here before at the ICC, in the unlikely event of an emergency, the ICC employs a siren system. If you hear what's described as a beep, beep, don't panic, but remain where you are and vigilant in case you hear a change in the tone to what is described as a whoop, whoop. If you hear the whoop, whoop again, don't panic, but prepare to evacuate the building and follow the instructions of the well-trained staff and move to the evacuation point. This is a non-smoking venue. You cannot smoke here in the main ballroom. You cannot smoke out in the foyer area. You cannot smoke on the escalators or any of the levels down here to the ground floor. You cannot smoke immediately inside the foyer or immediately outside. Look, if you want to have a cigarette over the next couple of days, best thing to do is get up from your table, go out through the doors at the back, turn right, go down the escalators you came up. 4 levels of escalators will get you down to the lobby. Head out, turn left. About 50 metres down there, you're at Darling Street. Turn right, walk down past the shops. There's a cab rank. Hail a cab. Go to the airport, the international airport. Buy yourself a ticket to Bali. When you're in Denpasar, you can knock yourself out on the cigs. Of course, you can vape because that is cool. We have a photographer on site. The lovely Brandy is taking photos over the next couple of days. If you do not want your photograph reproduced in social media and the like, just make that clear to Brandy. If you love having your photograph taken, just hang near me. The lens will always find me. Our hashtag for all your social media over the next couple of days is hashtag Banking2023AUS. We have a packed program over the next couple of days, compelling speakers to cover issues absolutely central to Australian banking in 2023 and beyond. We've also built in quite generous gaps for morning tea, afternoon tea and lunch, which leaves more than enough time for you to catch up on emails, phone calls, etc. So please, during our sessions, as much as is possible, devices down, screens off, and soak up all that these gurus have to offer. Please don't let our speakers look out and see that reflective blue forehead of indifference staring back at them over what promises to be an amazing couple of days. Now, to welcome us officially to our conference on behalf of the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council, please welcome to the stage Uncle Brendan Kerin.
Thank you and good morning everyone. My name's Brendan. You can call me Brendan. I'm a cultural representative, cultural educator for Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council. And for those of you that don't know about our Aboriginal Land Councils, we are the cultural authority and the guardians and custodians of land within our boundaries under our Land Rights Act. Guardians and custodians because unfortunately there's no traditional owners left within Sydney. They've been wiped off the face of the earth. My welcome to country is I always share a very brief history of country and my connection to country. And when I talk about country, I don't talk about Australia as a country because within Australia we had over 250 different Aboriginal language groups, tribes and clans that had their own country. Just in the Sydney area alone there are 29 tribes. And the boundaries for those 29 tribes start from the ocean and they're surrounded by 3 of Australia's most beautiful rivers. We have the Hawkesbury, the Nepean and the Georges rivers. In between those 3 mighty and beautiful rivers, there are 29 tribes, 29 nations, 29 countries. So the history of the Gadigal, Gadi actually is the language group, Gadi, Gal meaning people. And the history of the Gadi, in less than 50 years, 80% of local people was wiped out when Cook landed. And I feel just a tiny bit sorry for Cook. Just a tiny bit, because he was doing his job at the end of the day. But unfortunately the boat he was on was a floating incubator for disease. And the biggest killer when he landed was smallpox and the flu. It didn't take long for the English to realise this, and so there were instances of deliberately infecting clothing and blankets and handing that out to our communities and poisoning our waters, so in effect using chemical warfare. The second wave of the invasion on country brought what I call the land grab. And with the land grab came the massacres and the slaughters. I had 500 of my family members, men, women and children, that were all slaughtered just over water for their cattle to drink. Just over water for their cattle to drink. We then had a period of the kidnapped generation, not stolen generation, kidnapped. And my mother was kidnapped at the age of 5, locked up in a jail for 2 weeks, transported to training camp. And these training camps were known as Cootamundra Girls' Home, Kinchula Boys, Bomaderry at Wollongong. That's where the babies went. And they were taught and trained how to be servants and slaves. They were sent out to white families to work, never got paid a cent for the work they did, punished for speaking their own language and practicing their culture. Training camps. Just to give you a little bit of insight, Cootamundra Girls' Home, nearly 40% of all women that went through that home, 40% became pregnant while sent out to white families to work. In 1971, I was born at Crown Street Women's Hospital at Surrey Hills. And that's the last place I ever felt my mother's touch, in 1971. 7 years ago, I found her grave. 7 years ago, I found I'm one of 10 siblings that have all been taken. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm the second generation of my family that's been taken. The history I share is a very brief history of country. It's very brief. Because when you have a welcome to country, I always ask people to have a little bit of thought of what we've been through to get to where we are today. I can tell you the whole history of just about every race in this country. But how many of those races can say that about my people? We are the world's oldest living continual culture. We've been here since day one. You will never hear of stories in our clans of how we've travelled from another country to land here. You'll never hear those stories because that's never happened. We've been here since the beginning of time. Our stories relate to the creation times. Biami and Daramulum. And the Daramulum Biami's son, as he walked from mountaintop to mountaintop, created everything. I can show you the footprints of Daramulum where he walked from the mountaintop to mountaintop. I can show you those. I can show you the footprints of where Daramulum reascended back into the sky. So we've been here since day one. I always like to say we've been here for 250,000 years plus, BC. And the BC stands for before Cook. It's always an honour to perform a welcome to country ceremony, because the ceremony that we've been doing again since the beginning of time, it's not something we've just come up with to cater for non-Indigenous. It's a no-brainer. When you welcome people to your house, you need to show them where the toilet is. You need to show them where the kitchen and the food is. You also show them what rooms they can and cannot go to. It's exactly the same as when we traditionally welcome our neighbours to country. Where the water holes are, where the toilet is, what sites they can and cannot visit. So it's always an honour to perform ceremony back on country. I thank you for having me here because you've become a part of the rejuvenation of our tradition and culture back on country. So I thank you for that. The land we're gathered on this morning traditionally belonged to Gadigal. And Gadigal were one of those 29 tribes that make up the Eora Nation. And the boundaries again, Hawkesbury, Nepean and Georges rivers. On behalf of those Gadigal, whose ancestors are still in the land and the water. On behalf of Metropolitan Aboriginal Land Council as the cultural authority on these lands, it gives me great honour to welcome you all here this morning. I'd just like to finish off by playing a welcome song on the Yidaki, not called didgeridoo. Didgeridoo is a white man's word. The word Yidaki in my father's language means voice. So when we play Yidaki, there are songs we play. We just don't blow through it and make a noise. There's a Yidaki language. Yidaki is not a traditional instrument in New South Wales. It's a borrowed instrument. It has been known to have other names. One of the names I used to call it back in the day, I used to do a lot of busking up at King's Cross. And back in those days, it was a lovely place up the cross. It was almost a rite of passage for young men to go up there, get on the grog, make an absolute fool out of themselves, and then they've got stories they can tell their sons when they turn 21. So you can imagine the type of people I used to come across when I was busking up there. And every now and then a group would come up and they'd be drunk and go, brother, play us the didge, come on, brother, can you make the noise of an elephant, can you play this, can you play that? And I used to say to them, it's not called a didge, it's called a yulby. You'll be sore when I hit you with it, now keep moving. So ladies and gentlemen, I'll just finish off by playing a welcome song. I'd love to stay and have a yarn, but unfortunately I've got to pay a white bloke by the name of Wilson for parking on my own land. And he's not cheap either.